we're going to bring on Matthew Carpenter. I really appreciate this. Matthew is a co-founder of the company College Aid Pro, and it is an outstanding concept. His advocacy work is what we're bringing him on here today to talk about, and that is that the FAFSA change is going to remove the benefit that families with multiple children in college currently experience. So Matthew, thank you for joining us today, and it is all you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. That was awesome. First of all, Michelle, we've been fans from afar for a little while now, but it was great to kind of get, I learned a lot, and I'm excited to hook up with you. So if you'll entertain an audience, we're going to see how we can help the cause moving forward, and hopefully we can combine forces here, because at the end of the day, to me, what I was hearing is the missions are similar. It's how do we end this student debt crisis, right? And for me, and probably for all of you, it starts before, right? And I think we might have talked about this the other day, Candace and Tom, when we were chatting, but I hear all the time when we talk about the student loan forgiveness and, these plans of grandeur that Biden had during his crusade. That's great, right? That's great. If people benefit from that, awesome. But how does that solve the problem moving forward? We're going to be right back where we started 10 years from now if we don't get better at the front end of this process, right? That's what we're coaching all the time. We're trying to help people make good decisions, and the double Pell and just have more resources and access is a huge piece of that. And the other thing that sometimes it feels like we're going upstream, especially when there's changes going on, like this sibling rule. And there's a couple other changes that are coming down the pike, with that starting next year through FAFSA that I also think are going to be problematic. But we kind of had to pick our spot, was our strategy, to say, what do we think is the most egregious? What can most people kind of get behind? And then if we get, hopefully, what we're trying to do is get an audience ultimately with some of these decision makers, because rules like that come out, and I'll elaborate in just a few minutes here if you'll forgive my tangent, but rules like that come out and you say, who's in the room that's when these decisions are getting made? Do they understand the implications that this is going to have for so many families? Because to me, it's one of two things. They don't really understand the implications. They don't know that it's going to double the cost of college for so many families. That doesn't mean that there are not families that necessarily have means by any stretch, or they do know what they're doing and they're doing it anyway. So hopefully it's just the former there, and it's just kind of a matter of ignorance and honest mistake type of deal, right? Hopefully with right intentions, because some of the FAFSA changes are good, right? Some of them are a good thing, and we want to celebrate those. But to me, a lot of it got clouded specifically with the sibling rule and a few other things. So just like really quickly to give you, I think I'm a new face for most, if not all of you, by way of introduction. I got started. I've been my entire career in this ecosystem, and it all started based on my personal experience. I'm the oldest of three. My parents didn't know what they were doing, right? God love them, two hardworking people doing the best they can, but just going into this process totally blind. Of course, as a teenager, and myself and my siblings didn't know what we were doing. We had great college experiences, but the financial end result wasn't great. And then very quickly, it occurred to me that wasn't a unique experience, and had to believe there was a better way to do it. So that's kind of how I got started, to try to figure out there's got to be a better way to do this. And eventually that business kind of evolved into a technology. And the big reasons is, number one, there wasn't a scalable technological solution in this space that I thought was very good. And number two, with the nature of the high touch business, it was really hard to be aligned with our mission in that having an affordable scalable solution, or a free scalable solution, is something we couldn't offer. So a lot of families that needed our help the most couldn't afford to work with us, and we're always great with pro bono, but we want something for everybody. So that's kind of how we got started, and we're trying to do what we can on an individual basis working with families, but then on a more macro level, which is why we're here today, it's, what are some of the things that are really impacting everybody from the top down? Because again, when I talk about folks that are in a bad situation now, took on too much debt, and are continuing to repeat those mistakes, I blame them less so much as I do the system as a whole. You all know that we're kind of all up against it, right? Just kind of from the get-go, and it's not a transparent process. Nobody knows what they're getting into, and it's confusing, and it's overwhelming, and it's an emotional and all that. So I was upset because it hit home personally, and just, not just my family, but the, thousands of families that I worked with and work with, that I know how bad this sibling rule is going to be and what it means. Um, and when I was kind of laughing with Tom and Candace last week, and I'm like, listen to me, all I'm doing is complain, and I got to do something about it. What can I do? I didn't know. I never started a petition. I just kind of Googled, how do you start a petition? And that's how it started. And I'm putting the link in the chat if you all will indulge me. But basically, and we're starting to get hopefully a little bit of meaningful momentum. We have almost 60,000 signatures, but what we're trying to do is stop this from happening. And I'll show you a concrete example in a couple minutes here. And I'm sure a lot of you that have some experience here understand this, but the rule was set up correctly the way it is currently, where if we have more than one student in college at once, that's being accounted for in the formula. Right. And again, with this going away, it's going to have massive implications, again, for a decent percentage of the population. So we're trying to stop it. The ask is really simple. Please sign it. Please share it to anybody in your network, assuming that you agree with what we're trying to do here. And the other ask, and again, I'm hoping to meet with Michelle after the fact, is we're trying to get introductions to anybody that's a potential decision maker, anybody that's willing to advocate for these types of things, in Congress on Capitol Hill. So again, anybody that's willing, able to make an introduction, or anybody that has an audience, right? That's really what we're looking for. It's can we make enough noise to get people to say this is not the right thing? And it's not the only thing we want to fix, just like double Pell, but I think it's an important one. And again, the hope is that we get in front of the right people. Maybe we can talk about a few other things, right? I think that the FAFSA is still, even the changes, way too hard to complete, and they don't allow for it to have any type of automated process, right? We want to make this automated. We have technology that could help the current system, and it doesn't. It's not allowed. I don't want to get off topic too much, but there's many things that we could do to try to make this thing better. But this is kind of the ask right now. Now, what I want to do, just for anybody that's not really familiar with how this process works, essentially, and again, sorry if this is redundant for a lot of you, and I know it is, but really quickly, what we did is, and this is our platform here, and families will, or students will just answer a couple questions, 10 questions, takes about 2 minutes. It dumps them into the platform. And the first thing that we're looking at is their EFCs. Those are front and center because we know those are really important to driving our net costs at colleges. But what I did here is I put in an example that would be similar to Candace's family that had twins in college. And this isn't a wealthy family. I said collectively, each parent makes 60 grand, about $120,000 household income, family of four from the Boston area here. And even still, with twins, with two kids in school at once, $120,000 just outside of Boston, that's a lot to ask as your foundation for what you're going to pay each year for college. Forget about what you're going to pay above your family contributions, right? But if we look at these, right, if we look at this $12,000 EFC, and this rule goes away, so if I just want to change some inputs here, and I'm just going to take my student and say instead of saying they're twins, I'll make one of them a little bit younger. And we'll see, right, that federal EFC was 12,000. And then I think sorry, this thing can be a bit slow when we're on Zoom here. So bear with me for apparently an actual minute, if you would. But what I want to do is not only show, okay, here's the problem. I might be actually frozen, but here's the problem, not only from an EFC standpoint, right, but also what that does to the actual net costs at each of the colleges that we're considering, right, and effectively in a lot of ways it doubles the net cost. So again, for this family, what it will be moving forward is if we're a family of four that makes $120,000 collectively, and we have two kids in school at once, our minimum kind of foundation that the federal government is going to say we can pay for each year for school for each of the kids is $20,000, right? And that's for each one of the kids. So effectively, $40,000 a year at a minimum for each of the kids for a family of four that makes $120,000. So it's monumental. It completely changes the landscape of everything for these families. And again, this is twins, but even the families that might be 1 or 2 years apart or 3 years apart that we're going to get and should get a break in those overlapping years. That's that's backbreaking for so many families. So again, that's I know I'm being redundant here, but to me, it's always powerful to see how this plays out in practice, or how it will play out in practice, and in some ways, how ridiculous it is that it's even being that it's made it this far. So it's a huge goal of myself personally and our company and anybody that kind of believes in this to try to do something about this and this in this calendar year. That's kind of a big personal mission of mine. And again, the other big one is just the fact that we can't we want to do things that we can to make the FAFSA easier for families to file, but right now you can't do anything from a technological standpoint to help that. And it's not something we're trying to monetize. Matter of fact, one of the FAFSA rules is you can't charge for helping on the FAFSA next year if you're a third party. So that's not what it's about. But I think we have some better systems that are currently in place. And again, that's something else that we want to make easier for everybody, because as probably you all know, some folks don't complete the FAFSA just because it's too intimidating, confusing, and all this money gets left on the table, and maybe they don't even end up applying to college, right? And we don't even hear about those. Those don't even get documented. So, I mean, right now, the best thing that we can do is we have line-by-line instructions and on-demand and live courses and things like this. That is kind of the next best thing, but we want, again, to make sure that so many of these families that are leaving money on the table just because it's a larger barrier to entry than I think it needs to be, that we get better. We just got to get better.